My name is Keith Freeze, and we are going to be talking today about why I'm kind of a bit curious as to why the LA Kings aren't drafting some of their previous junior kings. Uh, the NHL has grown quite considerably over the years to the point where there are California born players that do make it to the NHL. You know, they always say about Trevor Moore, Thousand Oaks native, right? And I sometimes joke like he's from Thousand Oaks. I had no idea because they say it all the time and they are quick to remind you of it. But if they're quick to remind you of it and to let you know that there's been players that have played in California, specifically for the LA Junior Kings that are in the NHL now, it's a bit head scratching when some of these players that you know are very good young prospects, why the Kings don't draft them. Um, like in this past draft, I was really big on Will Skahan, and the Kings never drafted him. I think he went in the second round to Utah, so it wasn't like he was a first round top 10 pick that was out of their reach. They had a chance to draft him if they so chose. Maybe it's one of those things where that particular player they didn't have an interest in. I don't know. But what you have on the screen here, I saw this posted yesterday from the LA Junior Kings, but it says, "Congratulations to LA Junior Kings graduate Noah Davidson, who has announced his commitment to attend and play his NCAA Division I hockey at Boston College." Well, Boston College is no, Division II, low level Division I hockey program. It's the top, one of the more top prominent colleges that's producing players each and every year that end up getting selected in the NHL entry draft. So Noah, first off, I'll say to Noah personally, congratulations. When I was scouting a couple years ago, I actually met his dad and sat during the whole game talking to his dad about Noah and a handful of the other Kings players. But his dad was just really nice, very down to earth. And so congratulations to both Noah and his family because they seem like really nice, good people. Anyway, but it was very nice meeting you at the game and kind of talking to you and picking your brain a little bit. But at the same time, like on a more different note, Noah is far deserving of this commitment to Boston College. This is not a reach, in my opinion. Noah, in terms of playing for the Junior Kings when he did, he was one of their top line players and he was really successful on the team. Now, to give you guys kind of context for those that don't really follow Bantam or Pee Wee or anything like that. So, very briefly, I was working with Puck Preps and I stopped sending them scouting reports, not because their website was doing anything wrong, but I firmly believe that there were scouts for junior teams, whether it was in the CHL or the USHL, that were reading my work, and I wasn't getting paid for submitting my scouting reports, and I know that there was people getting paid by these CHL, USHL teams to do their job and scout, and they were just reading my reports and they went, sounds good, and they used that as their scouting technique or whatever. And if you're going to get paid off of me doing free work and you're going to continue to have your job, you're not getting my work anymore. So it wasn't about Puck Preps, it was just like whatever. And not to get too off topic, but this same thing happened with the Florida Panthers. Like, yes, those Florida Panthers, the NHL team. I had been working for Dauber Prospects for a little while, and Dauber is more about filling out sheets for fantasy hockey and trying to give you a recommendation about which players people should draft for their fantasy teams. But I was covering the Florida Panthers, and I will say that at the time that I took over coverage of the Panthers, Mackenzie Weegar was floundering in the AHL, and I saw something in Mackenzie Weegar where I was like, I think this guy actually has something going on. Like, I think he could be okay. And shortly after that, he ended up getting a call up to the NHL and played well enough to be part of the Calgary, Florida trade that landed Tkachuk in Florida. And additionally, at the time, I was doing scouting for the NHL entry draft, and there's plenty of articles on the internet. That's the thing about the internet. Love it or hate it, it's got receipts. It can work in your favor, it can work against you, but you got receipts. Now, one of the receipts that I have continuously is that I was really big on Anton Lundell at the same time that I was working for covering the Panthers for Dauber. So, so how is it that both Mackenzie Weegar gets a look when nobody else was giving him a look, and they just draft Anton Lundell at the same time in the NHL entry draft if they weren't reading my material? Now, I will be even more blunt. I emailed Bill Zito, the current GM of the Florida Panthers, about this and kind of said, hey, it's no coincidence. And Bill Zito actually did write me back, to his credit. But his mentality was basically like, well, yeah. And it was just like, okay. And I think I wrote back to him like, well, I'll see you someday in the show. And to any of the Kings people out there, everything I just said is true. Everything I've said on my videos is true. And if you're going to stick your neck out for me and help me out, I would love to be in the show. In fact, I would love to be in the show so bad that we beat the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup, and I look at Bill Zito with that look in my eye and give him a little wink like, I told you I'd see you in the show. Anyway, no, but I'm just saying, so when people take your work, it's hard to want to continue to put it out there for free. And then at the same time, like, watch other people not only get a payday off of your hard work, but get a promotion or a attaboy because they did a good job of picking somebody that was a good player. It's like, no, like, you should give credit where credit is due, or at least like stick your neck out for the person that kind of sparked your interest in looking at a prospect or whatever. Okay. But going back to this whole Kings thing, I know I got off track there, but I got to give you context a little bit. So going back to this Kings thing. Okay. So again, I question why sometimes the LA Kings don't draft some of their previous junior Kings. And again, Wilskahan was an example from this past draft. Aiden Park, who played for the LA Junior Kings, I think was draft eligible this previous year and never got selected. And I think he still has 2 more years of draft eligibility. But the point is that Aiden Park, at the time that he left the Junior Kings and went to play for Shattuck St. Mary, both him and Macklin Celebrini were kind of like a 1 and 1A. Macklin Celebrini being the 1 and Aiden Park kind of being the 1A. And as time went on, Macklin Celebrini kind of like distanced himself from the pack, and that's all well and good. But again, Aiden Park, when they first both joined Shattuck St. Mary, he really wasn't that far a step behind. And in fact, like, I would still say that Aiden Park has turned out to be like a pretty solid young prospect, and I think he will get drafted in this upcoming draft. But again, it's just one of those things where it's like, why wouldn't you take a flyer on Aiden Park in a later round? And to that point, I'm not part of the draft process. I don't know how difficult it is, but I would think that if you have a couple guys that you are legitimately interested in drafting and they're on the board within like the final 5 picks of the 7th round, like, would it really be that hard to pick up one of the 7th round draft picks? I mean, I honestly don't know. I'm not part of the process, but I can't imagine it would be super difficult to be like, give me the last pick in the draft and I'll give you future considerations or whatever, right? I know that I don't think they do future considerations anymore, but that's my point. Just basically, like, it's a throwaway. I can give you whatever. I'll give you a 7th round pick next year, or whatever. Anything. I'll give you one of my guys that's playing in Ontario. Whatever the case is. Okay, so my point is, and by the way, not to say people down in Ontario are disposable like that. I'm just saying that if you really wanted to make it work, you could make it work, okay? So, anyway, the Kings, I'm curious as to why they don't draft some of their homegrown LA Junior Kings players. Now, the more, like, obvious thing here, I mean, there's been players that have played in California, that have turned out to be really good. Like, Trevor Connolly was playing Pee Wee for the San Diego Saints, and then he played like very briefly in Bantam for the uh, Anaheim Junior Ice Dogs. Ice Dogs, yeah. If you're a true California hockey fan, you know all about the Ice Dogs. But I mean, I'm just saying that there's players that have come through other teams in the California area, playing for the Junior Ducks or playing for the Junior Sharks, anything. I mean, there's the California Bears or the former Golden Bears out in Burbank. I mean, there's plenty of players that have come through California that you could certainly keep your eye on. And I would argue that if you have had these guys in your building playing for the Junior Kings at Toyota Sports Performance Center, that you would have seen them when they were 13, 14, 15 years old, and you would have an understanding of who they were at that time. And maybe you do. Maybe you keep an eye on them. Maybe you talk to them. Maybe you see like, okay, they're a typical 13-year-old acting like a 13-year-old, whatever. Let's interview them in their draft year and see if they've matured a little bit. And maybe if some of them have matured or not, like let's say they haven't matured, I can understand why that would be a red flag. But my biggest one that I'm going to go to in terms of former Junior Kings that it's head scratching to this day for me why the Kings didn't draft him, and that's Dustin Wolf. Okay, so Dustin Wolf had played for the LA Junior Kings, and he was a big part of like his teams when he played. And at the time that he, got drafted into the NHL, he went in the 7th round. I have it right here. He went in the 7th round, 214th overall. Now, in that same draft, which is the 2019 NHL entry draft, Andre Lee was drafted in the 7th round by the Kings, and he went 188th overall. So the Kings had an earlier 7th round pick, and they took Andre Lee. And then as the draft went on, they didn't select again in the 7th round. Now, going back to my earlier point, I don't know how easy it is to go and trade for a 7th round pick, but I would think it's maybe not that difficult. And the thing that was really glaring to me about the whole thing with Dustin Wolf and like the draft that year was that Dustin was actually there in the stands with his family for both days. Like there's some guys that don't go to the draft at all just because it's financially a headache or whatever, but he sat there for 2 days. Now imagine the story that could have been where it was like he'd been sitting there for 2 full days. They get down to the last couple picks in the draft, 214. That's I think within like the last 5 picks of the draft. Okay. But you get down to the wire and here comes the LA Kings and they trade picks with the Calgary Flames to select Dustin Wolf, former LA Junior King. I mean, like what a culminating story that would have been. Even if it didn't pan out for Dustin Wolf, even if he didn't turn into the goaltender that he is now, like it still would have been a great story. It would have been one of those things where it was like, wow, like what a come full circle, That was what made Macklin Celebrini getting drafted by the Sharks kind of special too, because he was a former junior Shark. It just kind of like, whatever. And, to my other point saying about, maybe you interviewed this guy when he was younger, or you got to know him around the rink when he was younger, and you maybe have concerns when he's a little older, and that's a deterrent for you. I can understand that. But all the writing on the wall said that this was not a deterrent player. This was a player you'd want to jump at and draft wholeheartedly. So to that point, I'm going to read you a couple things here. That I found across the internet, and like we can go from there and you can tell me what you think. But Junior Kings coach Nick Vachon at the time said, in my opinion, he's one of the top 0-1 goalies in the country. He's dedicated himself to getting better, and it shows, continuously putting a lot of time and energy into working on his skills. We've admired his attitude, demeanor, and composure. No matter the situation, he's been dialed in. It's left us with no surprise that he's earned this opportunity. So, again, Nick Vachon, Junior Kings coach, was very complimentary about Dustin Wolf and basically said what I said, which was we leaned on him. He was a big part of our team. Now, a big part of this current LA Kings team is their general management staff and assistant general manager Nelson Emerson, who was director of player personnel at the time that this quote was written, but now he's the assistant general manager. So it's not a big deviation. And I'm not talking about, Joe Blow that just comes to the rink every once in a while and goes, "Hey, Dustin Wolf is pretty good." I'm talking about the current LA Kings assistant general manager said, once we started realizing how talented this kid was, we all got better. We'd go to Vancouver and we'd upset other superstar teams. Dustin would have a lot of shots. Our defense would play great, and the score was always 2-1 or 3-2 every time. So he's saying that because of Dustin Wolf, that he kept them in games. Dustin Wolf was good enough that when we played against tough teams, he was our safety blanket. He was our safety net. He was the one that kept us in the game, right? So this is, again, the current NHL LA Kings assistant general manager, Nelson Emerson, saying that. This is not like whatever, okay? So you gotta take the quotes from who they are, okay? Now, for myself personally, I found some older articles that I did for various things, and here was the things that I wrote about Dustin Wolf at the time. So I briefly, again, was working for Future Considerations, and when I scouted the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, I said Wolf showed plenty of poise, made some excellent saves, and his compete level rose with every stop. Size may not fit the mold of a modern-day NHL netminder, but IQ, swagger, and athleticism more than make up for it. Did a great job of remaining calm, cool, and collected. Really is a cool customer and doesn't get rattled easily. A study of head trajectory with excellent vision on the puck at all times. One of the more underrated parts of his game is his paddle and how active he is with it. Because his skating is so sound, he's not afraid to play the puck behind his net or clear the puck on a penalty kill. Quick pipe-to-pipe skater. So real quick, one of the things that I'll make note of, because I said head trajectory, was at the time the whole concept of goaltenders getting better with their eye vision, and as an example, they'll take their water bottle and they'll squirt water in the air, but they don't move their head. They move their eyes with the water to kind of get their eyes moving. And so that was a big thing at the time that was coming out. But he was one of the first players that really took to that. I don't know if he hired a coach for that or like a teacher for that, but he was really studying eye movement and just trying to get better about keeping his eyes active and not always having to move your head. So that's what I meant about head trajectory. He was already kind of like thinking the game ahead. And speaking to his thinking, Dustin Wolf is a very intelligent young man. And I kind of said that when I added this article for Beer League Heroes. I said Dustin Wolf finished the year as not only one of the best goaltenders on the ice, but in the classroom as well, winning the WHL's Darrell K. Seaman Memorial Trophy for the Scholastic Player of the Year. So he was not just a great player on the ice, but he was a great person in the classroom, okay? A real student of new age head trajectory. We know what that is. Wolf does a nice job keeping himself mentally balanced during games, doesn't get spooked easily, and seems to settle in more as the game goes on, finishing the year with a 1.69 goals against average and a .936 save percentage in 61 games played. Wolf showed equal dominance in the postseason, providing the Everett Silvertips with a true number one netminder. WHL Central Scouting ranking him as the 12th best North American goaltender is a fucking joke. So, again, NHL Central Scouting ranked him as the 12th best North American goaltender. So, NHL Central Scouting, what they do is they separate North American from European skaters, and they give them rankings. So, let's just say, if you combined the list, like on average, NHL Central Scouting thought that he was the 24th best goaltender available. from that draft, I'd have to go back and look, but I don't think that there was 23 other goaltenders that were ahead of him that made it to the NHL so far and are playing, really good hockey for the Calgary Flames. I don't, so again, like that's a reach. Now, drafting is not a science. I understand that. Drafting is not a science. NHL Central Scouting at I think it was 2017 said that they thought that Klim Kostin was the best European skater in that draft. I personally like Klim Kostin. I think he's a little bit sandpaper, and I kind of like that in my bottom six. But at the same time, like, was he the best European skater? Like, probably not. Okay. So my point is scouting is not a perfect science. You got to go off of whatever. Now, if part of that is the interview process or whatever, I mean, when a couple years ago when Moritz Seider got drafted, I was huge on Moritz Seider because the word that I had heard was at the time there was only 31 NHL teams, but he interviewed with all 31 NHL teams at the draft combine, which is like pretty unheard of that a guy gets interviewed by every team. I mean, some teams don't have a pick until the late first round pick. Some teams don't even have a first round pick. So for all 31 teams to be like, who is this Moritz Seider guy? And I want to find out. Let's do an interview, right? So my point is I think the interview process does play a big part in it. But for a guy that is like winning Scholastic Student of the Year while also putting up big numbers in that junior season, having been a former LA Junior King, and then sitting in the crowd with 5 picks left in the draft, and that you can make a trade to go get this guy and you don't do it, it's a head scratcher for me, man. I don't know. That one's a bit baffling to this day for me. So I don't know what the thing is with the LA Kings where they're not big on drafting former LA Junior Kings or, too many California born players. I don't know what it is, but maybe they just, I don't know. Maybe this don't follow up on them after they play for the Junior Kings. I really have no idea. Or maybe their development staff tells them, no, I don't, maybe he's a good player now, but he's not going to be a good player later. I don't know what, but there's definitely something going on with the Kings where they shy away from drafting LA Junior Kings, California Pee Wee Bantam player. I don't know what it is, but I would certainly, if I was the Kings, I would make the recommendation, just start considering it. Start looking at some of these guys, start really questioning, can they be players? I don't know. Maybe they do. It just, for the how many players are coming out of California now and how many are actively making an impact in the NHL, it's a bit glaring, and even not in the NHL, but the NCAA or whatever. I mean, it's one of those things where the law of averages would say that at a certain point they should be drafting some of these kids because they are good players. So I don't know what that is, but maybe in time things will change. Either way, my name is Keith Fries. Thank you for checking out this video. As always, go Kings go, and have a great one, everybody.